Welcome, everyone, to the Rosie and Bill Show. If you could ever use a laugh or a reason to smile, I highly recommend that you fire up the device of your choice and pull up one of the comedy specials from our guest tonight. I promise you'll be glad you did. And if you ever get the chance to see him live, take that chance and go. It'll be worth it. Please welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show, one of the best in the funny business, Juston McKinney. Juston, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bill. Hey, Rosie.
Hi, Juston. So nice to have you on the show. We've been watching some of your specials and got a lot to talk about tonight. But before we get into kind of what's going on now, we want to kind of get back to what things were like for you growing up before you got into the stand-up business, before you went into law enforcement.
Well, it's funny you ask, because when you talk about growing up, it just came out 3 weeks ago. I did a TED Talk called A Comedian's Guide to Surviving a Dysfunctional Childhood. And it was a look into my life. I kind of had to go back there. And I had basically in the TED Talk, I talk about how my mom passed away when I was 6 years old. So my mom's sister ended up moving in to help take care of us, and ended up in a relationship with my dad. And then she brought some of her kids. So in this one house, there was a dad, an aunt, 2 cousins, 4 brothers. It was there was alcoholism. Like, I get into that. I definitely stepped out of my comfort zone for this TED Talk. And, people have seen my stand-up over the years. They'll see me talk about my dad or talk about my childhood. And on stage, it always comes from a funny point. It's always set up joke. The TED Talk it gets a little deep, and I stepped out of my comfort zone for it. So, but that's where I got my comedy from, was the way I grew up. And, and my dad, side note's been sober 18 years now. So it's a happy ending there. It was all boys, cousins, and, my 2 cousins were boys. And then I had 3 brothers. My grandfather lived with us for a little while, which I didn't even get. It's funny. The TED Talks have to be under 20 minutes.
Right.
I think mine was 19 and change. So I had to keep trimming it, because, how much could I put in there? But there's a joke on the Bright Side special, where I talk about how my grandfather was married 5 times, and my grandmother was, my grandfather rather was my grandmother's 1st and 4th husband. So they got divorced. She took half his stuff. Then she came back and took half of his other half. So she got 3/4. So that wasn't in my TED Talk, but that made it as a stand-up joke. I like it. It's light, it's dysfunctional, but it stays with the funny. And it was pretty crazy growing up. But it probably made me become there's no doubt it made me get into comedy.
Well, Juston, I have to tell you, having just recently watched that TED Talk, and there are some jokes in there, but there's some very serious moments, and I commend you, because you could tell there are moments in there where you get choked up, but you also take the time to share some rules and some lessons that I would highly, just like I said at the kickoff of this show, if you could use a laugh or a reason to smile to watch your comedy specials. If you could use some help with some life lessons and overcoming adversity, this TED Talk is just the prescription.
Yeah, my dad, I didn't want him there when I did it live, because I knew that if he was in the room, I would have trouble with it. And I just, they talk, should your dad come out at the end? And I go, if I know he's there, because there's no way to practice this TED Talk. It just was me, and it's all have to be, it's timed. It has to be a certain length. And I was so worried about getting through it and hitting the points and getting to those lessons that I talk about. So it was definitely unlike anything I ever did. And up till 2 weeks before, I remember I was telling friends, I'm like, man, why'd I say yes to this? Like, how can I get out of this? I wanted to try to back out of it. Like, I just wasn't in a spot. And then I just said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. put my head down and go for it. Now that I'm glad I did, and I've already heard from people, teachers have reached out, have shown it to students. I've had people that have shared it with people. So that was the reason I did it, was to try to, even my kids have friends who've gone through different dysfunctional situations, and it's like, you think you're all alone and no one else has to deal with this, and why me? And then what am I going to do with that? Am I destined to go follow in this path or go in this path? And so that was why I did it. And I'm glad I did.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we also appreciate our first and longest running sponsor of the show, Tom and his team of insurance professionals at the Malin Agency. If world-class customer service and doing business with someone you can trust is important to you, give Tom and his team a call today for all your insurance needs.
It's interesting you said that you're sure that's why you became a comedian. And, were you ever afraid that it was going to go in a direction you didn't want it to go, having grown up in that environment?
I don't think so. And I have to tell you, and I was talking to my oldest brother about this too. I mean, both of us kind of had this same kind of thing. Not, losing my mom, it really made me as a child think that she was kind of watching me. And I used that a lot. Like I could remember in 7th and 8th grade when some of my friends were making some bad choices and I literally wasn't. Because of that. And that was a little bit of a guardian angel or whatever. I mean, we weren't going to church, it wasn't like, that at the time, I don't know, something I just always believed that she was watching or she was there.
That's
so I think that always, I think I tried to make a lot of good decisions when I was, and maybe I hadn't have had that not happened either. So, it's the whole, does everything happen for a reason, which
yes,
who knows? I mean, what you have to say to get through things. But no, I didn't. And then with my dad, with his drinking, like, I drank when I got up into high school, but I was well aware of how much and what I did. And could you stop? Could you not drink for a month? Could you go, you kind of know pretty early if you might have an issue. So I was very well aware of it. So I don't think I ever had that fear.
That's great. What made you move to New York City?
So, I was, I touched on it briefly in the TED Talk. I keep referring to this, but it's such my life story. So I had gotten into law enforcement, was my first career right out of high school. I went to community college and then became a rural patrol deputy sheriff in the state of Maine along the New Hampshire border. And while I was doing that, and I would go into the schools. I did the DARE program with kids. And as I'm talking to kids and I'm up in front of people, and that's when I kind of said, man, I really want to try this stand-up thing. So I was still working at the department when I went down to Boston for the first time, was where I did my first open mic. And I spent almost 3 years. I stayed on part-time on the sheriff's department. And then I would go to, I would work in the Boston scene. And then in 1997, a friend of mine said, there's a club owner named Kerry Hoffman who owns Stand Up New York. And he's looking for people, send him a tape. So I sent him a tape and he called me up on the phone and he said, hey, I want you to come down to New York. I want to manage you. Off of the tape. So this was a New York City manager. So I'm like, okay, let me come down. So I went down and met him. And he was like, I'll manage you. This is my club. You'll go on here. And, I didn't really know or have any guidance at that point when you're so new at it. I mean, it happened so fast. So I didn't sign with them because I just was like, let's pump the brakes. Let's see what happens. And I got really lucky really fast. Like a lot happened. And that so at the same time, there was a commercial agent that was that my college agent knew and worked for Don Buchwald Agency in New York City, and said she wants to come see you to sign you to be, for commercial auditions. So she got me a spot at the Comic Strip Live. So because otherwise I couldn't get a spot there. So I went down, did an audition. Just so happened Lucian Hull, the owner of the club, was there watching. I come off stage. This woman, Kristen's like, I want to sign you. And the club book is right there going, well, you can work here, you can pass. And I go, I wasn't even in New York yet. So I was still up in Boston. So I'd gotten, and then there was one other club before I got in, Caroline's on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
I just on a whim, I just called up Lewis, the guy over there named Lewis, and I said, "Hey, I'm in town, and I just was wondering what the process is to get in." And then again, I'm like, I was here to be seen by Don Buchwald. I was just on at the comic strip, and what? He goes, you want to do 20 minutes tonight? It was literally like one of those. So I go down there, I do it, I get off stage. He goes, I want to book you for a week. So that's when I'm like, all right, I'm moving to New York.
I
So
just got chills when you said that.
yeah.
Oh my God.
But I'm telling you right now, the early success. Now, this is TED Talk 2.0, which I haven't done yet. But there's another step to what you saw, Bill, which is so I had early success. I got an agent. We're talking the late 90s now, because then I'm in all the clubs. And then UTA out of LA came to see me, Ruth Ann Secunda, and got me a development deal. So I got a couple development deals with CBS Productions. And then I got another one with Warner Brothers back to back years. But all the money they gave me. And I'm sure you're familiar about how the development deals worked back then. They'd give you hundreds of thousands of dollars to create a show around you. And if the show didn't get picked up, you still got that money. So here I am in my late 20s, left a career. Everything's going where I wanted it to go. And there was a waiter at Dangerfield's Comedy Club who was a part-time stockbroker. So I slowly took some advice from him, gave him a little bit of money, then gave him a little more, gave him a little more. He was doubling it, doubling it, doubling it. Long story short, in 2000, the dot-com crash,
Oh,
lost all the money, literally wiped me out. So, and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars on paper, and I lost it all. And then, so there I am once that happened to me. So here it is, looking back as a second, now I can look back at it, but I'd lost my mom, right? My dad was an alcoholic. I got this break of a lifetime to have this money, which would have set me up to do whatever I wanted, because I should have bought a place, and then I could have just worked on my stand-up. Instead, the depression that led to that, I go and I get Jay Leno. So I moved to LA in 2001 after I just lost all that money. Like, I'm moving to Los Angeles. And I did my first Tonight Show with Jay Leno in 2002. And it's like, I can't even watch me on that show, because it's like I know what's behind me. I was like, it was the only thing I'd ever wanted to do was get on the Tonight Show, but I had squandered it. So, long story short, that's why I ended up back in New England and live in New Hampshire, because we couldn't afford to buy in the early 2000s. So we saved up our money, and we ended up moving back here in 06. So that waiter, that's the guy. If you look at one guy, if I could never have crossed paths with him, talk about the domino effect. But had I not, would I be with my wife? Would I have my two beautiful kids? And as you know, no, I wouldn't. So who knows what could have happened? So, but it was a roller coaster, and but yeah. And so, I'm blessed to be able to do what I'm doing now. But there's no question. I would be lying if I said it doesn't constantly roll in my head. It just pops up, these thoughts. My place in New York City was a 2.5 family. And I remember the landlord being in the kitchen like it was yesterday, was going to sell me the place. I could have bought the whole place with cat. Not only did I not buy it, then it got to 2000. So that was in 2000. Cut to 6 years later, I paid the same money for a place back in New Hampshire because the real estate market had shot up. So it's this whole timing. What's with my timing? Hey, the luck of the Irish. My dad's an alcoholic. I lost my mom. I lost my money. You know what I mean? Like, when's that luck of the Irish kick in? I remember thinking that.
Well, the good news is your timing is good on stage.
Yeah, I hope. I keep working on it.
Yeah, and Justin, I have to tell you, especially now that you shared that TED Talk 2.0 information with us, which obviously we weren't aware of, and I have to say, like, in the TED Talk, I felt bad when, you're going on with Conan O'Brien, and of course, they've got just Justin instead of On, which I'm sure as you mentioned, you get that all the time, and I'm thinking, oh man, that's a bad break. Although you were on the show, but then that's nothing compared to these real life obstacles and hurdles that you've overcome. Your mom must still be watching over your shoulder to come through all of these things the way you have. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you. I think so, I think so, but but I'm human. So it's been a battle. You know what I mean? It's definitely been a battle. And yeah, and so for the last 6 years, I haven't been sleeping at all. And I think it's stress and anxiety, right? We're all dealing with stress and anxiety. So I just took
Yeah.
I went and did a sleep study because my wife was like, I bet you have sleep apnea. I bet you have sleep apnea. But no offense to my wife, but she's been wrong on everything she's ever said about me. Like, I mean, she's literally had me go to the doctor like 7 years ago. I think I can share this. 7 years ago, she thought I might have had some kind of a lung disease or pulmonary something because she looked at my fingers. She goes, "Did you notice your nails?" Like I looked at your nails, and she said they had something on my nails, like club fingers, or she was saying something. And I go, "When were you looking at my fingers?" She goes, "When you were sleeping." And I'm like, "What do you got your little iPhone light out, and you're like an autopsy, and you're like going, like let me sleep in peace, right?" So I go into the doctor and I like all the list of things my wife said that I should be I should be looking at my hands look different. She was looking at pictures between my hands and 20 years apart on my wedding day and now. And I'm like, yeah, these pictures are 20 years apart. And then I come home. She's like, what did he recommend? I go, he recommends you see a psychiatrist. Um, but anyway, my point is, I'm getting back to this because I've been starting to talk about this on stage as I'm talking about because she was right about the sleep apnea. So it made me think of that story. And so in 2 weeks I get the machine, but and we'll see what happens. But I mean, I can't even imagine what it's going to feel like if I can get used to the darn thing. But I've been sleeping horrible for years, and I just assumed it was the stress and the anxiety and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So
Yeah, and you don't seem like I know a lot of times with when it comes to sleep apnea, you don't seem like the prototypical, candidate or for that type of situation, but there's got to be something going on.
well, it's funny. They measured my neck, and they're like, "Yeah, you probably. Yeah, I don't know if you'd have it. I mean, usually your neck's going to be. I don't remember what it was, but mine's like 4 inches thinner than what it's normally. To even have it. So I don't know. Maybe I have the skinniest neck for anyone who's ever had sleep apnea. I don't even know if you can
Well,
tell. Pretty skinny.
well, hopefully whatever it is, as long as you can get some rest and keep doing what you're doing, because again, as you're sharing some of these things that you've overcome and dealt with, and there's even some other aspects of your life that we haven't even touched on yet, Justin. And one of them is, in addition to your comedy work and the work you did as a sheriff, you've also been on the big screen a couple of times. So
A
you were
little.
in Here Comes the Boom and Zookeeper. So how did those opportunities come about?
A little bit. Those I owe that to my friend Rock Rubin and Gary Valentine and Kevin James. That's how I got to know Kevin James through Rock Rubin and Gary Valentine. And so I was living in LA, but it's and they were just first thing I did was The King of Queens, an episode of The King of Queens.
Oh,
I
that's
played an
right. Yeah.
EMT. And I think that was probably about in '05 or so. So they've always been great to me. So like, hey, why don't you do this? So I play an EMT. It's an episode called Name Dropper. If you're anyone who's fans of that show. So Doug, Kevin's character, fakes the heart attack because he can't remember his coworkers of his wife. And he fakes a heart. I'm the EMT in the ambulance. And I remember when we did the thing, we just did a run through. We did a rehearsal. And then they go, all right, we got it. And I'm like, that was it. That was it. And there's only a couple lines. I just said, explain the pain, oh, it's tingling up my right, my right arm. Oh, heart attack would be your left arm. It's like, it's just a quick exchange like that. But anyway, so then I moved in '06 though. So now in '06, so now I'm back here. So I left Los Angeles. Now I'm back in New Hampshire in 2006. So I kind of hadn't done anything for a little while because kind of like out of sight, out of mind, which is a lot of what this business is. When you move and you go away and you're not in these circles and you're not staying in contact. I mean, and then all of a sudden I got a call about I think the first one was I think it was Zookeeper. Yeah, because they were filming it back in New England. So that's how that had come
Oh,
about.
okay.
So they thought of me. So I played the hotel manager there. And then after that, they're like, "Oh, we got this one. Here comes the boom." So it was actually fun. But that's the thing. I would have done more acting had I stayed. That was my plan. But when I had lost and botched all that money, I wasn't able to. I had to go on the road to pay bills and to put money down to buy a house. So it kind of took. I wasn't auditioning for anything because early on in my career, you know who Sidney Lumet is? The director of like Serpico, the movie Serpico.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He had a show called 100 Center Street, and I had to go in and like read for him, the director, and like I booked a pretty decent part on a show called 100 Center Street. This is in like 2000, like this is early. So I'm like, oh, really? I really enjoy this acting stuff, and but then I just got away from it a little bit, and I'd love to do more of that as well. I just think it's really fun. I did a web series called Hosed about a volunteer fire department in the fictitious town of Effing Woods, New Hampshire. And Lenny Clark was in that, and Gary Valentine, speaking of, came up and played a part in that. But then Dennis Leary got involved. We sold that to the IFC, Independent Film Channel, and it just didn't. So much of this stuff is luck. Who are the producers? Who's the buyer at the time? What happens if someone buys something of yours and then they get replaced? The new person comes in and doesn't want to pick it up. So there really is a lot of luck. It's really out of your control. But I'm still looking to go back out and do some more stuff in the future. My kids are getting older now. I have a freshman and a junior in high school. So I'm just now, I mean, as I'm doing this interview, like in the last couple of weeks, I'm like, I'm looking to start going back out.
Wow.
With all these accomplishments, when you look back, did you see this for yourself as a young comedian? Did you see all the success, not only in
Oh, no, I thought I'd be further along, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, when you say success, I mean, I don't know. I think what I really did see was I would have stayed in New York and LA and got to a level where, I mean, look, I do well here. I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed, but I don't have national exposure. I mean, I'm coming to Soul Joel's on December 5th. I'm hoping.
Wait a minute, that wasn't just a rumor, Justin. You're actually coming to the comedy capital of the world, Pottstown, Pennsylvania?
When I started, there was a few places I wanted to go, and Pottstown was top 5 in America. And it is finally happening. So yeah, but I mean, I'm hoping I get a great crowd out there, but we'll see. This is going to help being on your show, I'm sure. But
and when is that? December 5th?
December 5th. It's a Thursday night.
Okay. Yeah. Soul Joel's, comedy capital of the world, December 5th. Yes. I think I know some people who are going to be there for sure.
Well, I can't wait. I really do love work, like getting out on the road and working and going to these places. And as I mentioned, my kids are getting older. So next year in 2025, it's the most I will have traveled since they've been born. I'm doing, and I'm not going crazy, but I mean, I'm going to Canada. I know I'm going to Florida. I'm going to Minnesota. I'm going to, Pennsylvania. Obviously, I'm going to New York and a couple other places. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting out there a little bit more and spreading my wings. But I mean, when I left the department, to answer your question, Rosie, when I left the department, I always was like, all right, I stayed on part-time just in case I had to fall, if I needed to fall back into it. And I always felt pretty good that I could make a living at it. But yeah, you just never know where it's going to go. But I feel like none of us are ever really happy, I think, in this business. I mean, it's like you always want more to get a little bit further. And but yeah, did I answer that, Rosie?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, and Justin, I have to tell you, before I ask my next question, I just have to share this because, Rosie and I have been blessed to have many incredible comedians like yourself on the show. And I've been a fan of stand-up for many, many years. And one of the things I really enjoy about your shows are from start to finish, there are no lulls. I'm not sitting there for 20 minutes waiting for the good part. It's just one after the other from start to finish. So that's why, again, I'm just going to come back to something I said at the very outset of the show, which is if you have a chance to see Justin live, do it, because I promise you're going to enjoy every minute of it. And one thing I noticed, Justin, on your website was, see if I get this right, when you're not dadding, you're touring clubs and theaters around the country. So it's pretty clear from how I read that you've got your priorities in order in terms of family. So I have 2 questions for you after reading that. One is, what's your favorite part about being a dad?
I mean, I think the favorite part is just having someone, once you have kids, it's not about you anymore. And I think that's my favorite part, is it's not about me anymore. It's about them. And it really is. And I've had this conversation with a lot of younger comedians too, where I'm like, you want to look back and be like, okay, I have another million or $2 million in my bank account, but I never saw my kids, you know? So with me, because of how I grew up, that's why I have like, I mean, I think last year I got on a plane twice last year. And I get on like twice a year the last 10 years. Like very rare do I travel. Now that they're becoming teenagers, and I think they kind of don't want to see me as much. I mean, that's on them. I'm like, hey guys, want to do movie night? No, I'm going with my friends. I'm like, all right, I'll be here. So they're getting to that point where I feel like I can branch out a little more, and it's 2025. But yeah, I think it's just, there's a line in the TED Talk that I know you saw, Bill, where it's like, you always wanted to give the kids a childhood that you didn't have.
Right.
So
And you
I
don't
so
want to
I
repeat the cycle.
yeah, so I go out of my way, to try to to just give them that, to just to be called dad, right? I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
when just to have someone like you're their dad, it means a lot to me. And yeah, it's definitely the most important thing in my life. And, you know, like soccer, like, I mean, just look at the awards assembly. Like my kid just won defensive player of the year on his team. And
Wow.
as a junior for his team. And it's like, just to be there, to be able to see that. And I 90 to 95% of all these things I'm able to see. And I rarely miss anything. And I think the team's going to be so good next year that I actually took the day of the state championships. I blocked it. I'd already told my agent next November, I'm not working this day because I think this team's going to make it to the state championships.
Wow.
So I just already blocked it out a year in
Yeah.
advance.
That's
It's a
awesome.
lot of pressure on them, but you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah. But Justin, I also like the fact that in the TED Talk, I believe you said that there are times when maybe, you don't want them to have the childhood that you had, but maybe just like a couple days of it, just for some perspective, right?
yes, that's right. That was my comic relief there, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I'd like to let them have it for a few days just so they have a little more appreciation. But yeah, it is true. I mean, they just. I mean, I'm out yesterday buying them ski gear. You know what I mean? And I'm just looking, going, you kids have no idea. I mean, it's like, but I mean, but I'm happy to, you know what I mean? But in the back of my head, it's like, and you hope they appreciate it. And but yeah, I mean, it's the best thing. A friend once told me that having kids is the best thing and the worst thing. And I think what he meant by the worst thing was the stress, the pressure. You worry all the time. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
constant worry. So hence my not sleeping. It's the stress, anxiety. You're worried about them. What are they doing? What's going on in school? They've got this issue, that issue. It really is a lot. And the Surgeon General just came out like 3 weeks ago and said that parenting is hazardous to your health. Like it's like they came out with a warning, and it's like it's no right, no surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. And it never, the problems and the challenges, they never go away. They just get maybe different
Yes,
as time goes
yeah,
on.
you'll never stop worrying. I mean, if you're 70 years old and your kids are 40, they're still your kids. So
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Justin, the other half of that was when you're touring and performing. What do you love most about that?
I think the thought of when I have somebody that's been following me for a while and they're like, "Oh, I've been following you for so long," and then they show up at the show, like that is like I already know there's going to be some people at Pottstown who have seen me multiple times who follow me, and now I'm coming down there. They've already reached out to me online. So, knowing that you have these people that like that's their night off, their night to do something, they want to spend it with you. And knowing too that that might be the only night that they get a babysitter and they come out that night, or they're able
Yeah.
to do it, and being able to just let them forget everything and laugh and just have fun. I mean, that's probably the best part. I mean, obviously seeing the food and seeing the places is fun, but I mean, I don't go long though. Like I'm most of my like 2 nights. I don't do, before my kids were born, I was doing Vegas. It would be 7 nights a week. I was doing the occasional cruise ship, 7 nights. And then
Right.
once my kids came, I kind of backed off all that because by day 3, 4, I was just too depressed. I'm like, I had to, it's like I had to, I had to come back. So I, when they were younger, it was like when I would go out, I traveled a little more when they were like 2, 3, and I hated it,
Wow.
you know?
Wow. Yeah. Well, you have your priorities in order, and that's wonderful because like you said, that's they're the memories that you can't buy those things.
Mm.
You know, you can't get them
Yeah.
back. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they'll appreciate all the wonderful things that you're doing for them now. Someday, if they don't already, it will come back and they'll
Yeah.
say, wow,
Someday.
Dad and Mom really treated us well and took good care of us, you know.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, Justin, the time always flies, but we thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. We really appreciate it. And we hopefully will catch you at Soul Joel's. And folks, Soul
Yeah.
Joel's, December 5th. Check
December
out
5th.
Juston McKinney. And thanks so much, Justin. And folks, thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Look, I'm all for the environment, but look, let's be honest. I mean, the options are not good. You've got the paper straw. Those are great as long as you're not drinking anything that's wet. If you can finish a drink in under 60 seconds, that's a good choice. But I mean, come on. You guys try to drink a frozen margarita drinking out of an empty paper towel roll? I mean, they're like, well, it's biodegradable. Yeah, no crap. It's biodegrading in my mouth and in my cup. I mean, look, I just want to wait a few more years before I get off the plastic straw. I mean, there's too much going on. We just come out of a pandemic, right? And then now we're looking at World War III. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hang on to those masks. Right, and in Ukraine, every man from 18 to 60 has to stay and fight. Does anyone know if that's the age in this country? 60? That's kind of pushing it. If I'm 60, like, you gotta fight, I'm like, I go to bed at 9:30. I mean, I got a CPAP machine. I'm gonna need an outlet. Is that a problem? I just got a Tempur-Pedic bed. It's coming Friday between 12 and 5. I gotta sign for it. I gotta fight the Russians? And I'm a little concerned because in this country, we can't get 18 to 60-year-olds to go to work, let alone go to war. We should have a draft where we draft people into jobs. Go to some 22-year-old, you're drafted. I don't want to die. Well, I'd be very careful working the drive-thru. I mean, it's bad. I mean, I went to take my 11-year-old to a haunted house in October, and he's like, Daddy, is it going to be scary? I'm like, well, on the bright side, with the labor shortage, there won't be as many people jumping out at you this year. Haunted house, more like a help wanted house. There were help wanted signs up everywhere. There was a big sign that said, scare yourself, it's been a shitty year.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Doherty & Company Insurance Services for all your business and personal insurance needs. Our friends at Tennis Addiction in Exeter, PA. And the Malin Agency, where exceeding expectations is how they do business.